Hi, everyone. Welcome back. I'm excited to bring a really interesting topic to you this week. It's something that I deal with a lot in my office with clients that I work with. And it really kind of answers the question that people have about emotional availability. So I'll just dive right in and ask you the question. Do you think you're living with someone who is emotionally unavailable to you? Now, I'll be honest. A lot of the times that I work with men, they've been accused of this. But at times, I think sometimes women are accused of being emotionally unavailable. And so, what I'd like to do with you in our time together this week is I would like to look at some reasons why people either are or are perceived as emotionally unavailable. Some strategies that I think can be helpful for male or female brains that I think can make a difference here, some tips on what emotions are and some ways to think about them, and then maybe some final reasons why this is such a big deal, in my opinion. Let's just start off why people are either labeled as emotionally unavailable or they believe that they are. I think sometimes it's because they didn't have an example either growing up or since then. If you've never had an example of someone showing you emotional confidence, is what I like to call it, or expressing their emotions on a regular basis, then you've not had that opportunity, especially for men. I think female brains are more wired to be more emotionally expressive and available than male brains. So this is probably why males struggle with this more. But if you never had an example, then this is a very complicated thing to figure out by yourself. Another reason I think people struggle here is because they don't have a voice, or they don't think they have a voice, or they've been told they don't have a voice. And if you think when you want to finally be emotionally vulnerable and you want to share where you're coming from, and if it's not either heard or understood or cared for, it's very tempting to just kind of keep that to yourself. And again, I'll refer back to the male brain. The male brain has a lower tolerance level here for emotional pain in terms of being able to express that openly. And if he feels like he doesn't have a voice, then what he'll often do is just keep his feelings to himself. A third reason is retaliation. Worse than not having a voice is exercising it and then getting your hand slapped. And so sometimes that's exactly why people don't show emotions, and why they maybe even have labeled themselves as someone that doesn't show emotion. They train themselves to think that way. Maybe they've even told everyone around them, I don't do emotion. I'm not an emotional person. I'm not very expressive. And if you've said that to yourself, and if you've said that around people, and you've trained the inner circle of your life to believe that, then that's going to be a very difficult environment to make some changes. So that's just a few reasons why people may struggle here. Let's look at some strategies, because reality is, if you struggle with emotional availability or expression, there have to be some things that you can do that really move the needle here. And the three are admit, believe, and choose. First of all, admit that you are an emotional creature. Now again, if you've been telling everyone around you that you're not, this is going to be a little bit different. Admit that you are an emotional creature. Admit where you are an emotional creature. I mean, do you like sports? I mean, how do you react when someone cuts you off in traffic? What happens when you lose your keys or your phone or your wallet? I mean, I think all of us, at least most of us, are emotional creatures, and we at some point do express that. The caution here is that we have to be careful not to label either ourselves or our partners as unemotional or unexpressive. Unavailability can be a context issue. In other words, if you come home at the end of the day and you work long hours and you're just not, there's nothing left, sure, we all have those days where we're unavailable. But it can't be like that all the time. And so be careful not to label yourself or your partner as just perpetually unavailable. If you want to get better here, admit that you're an emotional creature and that you probably could use some help, because there's help available. There's a lot of resources that can help all of us become more what I call emotionally confident. All right, so that's the first part. Let's just admit that we are emotional creatures. The second part is to believe that we can grow here. Believe that you can get better. I believe it was Henry Ford that was credited for saying, if you believe that you can or you can't, you're right. And he's also the one that's credited with developing the first 8-cylinder engine on a single block. Back in the 1920s, he challenged his engineers to come up with an 8-cylinder engine, and that hadn't been done yet. And several of them were naysayers and didn't believe it could be done. And so he handpicked a select few and he set them aside and he said, I want you guys to work on this because it can be done. Now, whether they believed in the 8-cylinder engine or not, they believed in Henry Ford. And Henry Ford said it can be done. And so they did it. They developed a V8. And thankfully, many of us drive one of those even now. Well, believing that you can is a huge step forward because that opens up all kinds of possibilities then for you to become more emotionally confident. Now, there was a book written in 1990 by a guy by the name of Daniel Goleman, and his groundbreaking research was called Emotional Intelligence. It's an amazing book. It's kind of a big read. It's a thick book. And it shares a lot of benefits, first of all, on why emotional intelligence is such a big deal. And I'll be honest with you, since COVID-19 in 2020, that's one of the top sought after skill sets in the workplace today. It's also one of the most difficult ones to train. And the benefits are so numerous. You're healthier, you're happier, you have longer lasting relationships, you have deeper friends, you make more money. You're as a person, you're just a better, you have a better mindset. I mean, there's just numerous benefits on having emotional intelligence. So I talk to my clients about emotional confidence. And frankly, in order to have emotional confidence, you just have to have some success somewhere and then just to continue to see that growing. You can grow here too. Believe me, I've seen, especially men, I've seen women grow here, but that's not as often because most women are already emotionally confident. But I've seen a lot of men grow here in this area just because they expose themselves to the kinds of places and people that help them here. So, okay, admit that you're an emotional creature. Believe that you can grow in terms of emotional confidence. And here's the one I want to spend more time with. Choose safe places to grow here. Now the term safe places has become so overused and cliche, and I don't like how it's even used sometimes as the brunt of a joke. But the fact is, we all need a safe place to be emotionally vulnerable. And if you're going to choose safe places to practice emotional confidence, then by all means, allow yourself to spend some time with people who are already emotionally confident. If you're trying to grow here, the first place is probably not the place that you've already convinced that you're not an emotional creature. So choose some friends or select some or spend more time with some friends that are emotionally confident. People that you say, man, why do you never have freak out moments? Or how do you handle this so well? Or ask them those questions. Like, talk to them. Open yourself up. Open that part of your brain to have a conversation about it. And then allow yourself to practice something very simple, very small, in a safe place where someone isn't going to judge you for it. Maybe someone that values it. All right? So choose some environments and some friends. Take some courses. I mean, I've got some on my video channel here that you can check out on communication and conflict and affirming people, giving affirmation and having better conversations. But there's lots of courses out there. A lot of them are free. Read some good books on the subject. I like the book by Dr. Susan David called Emotional Agility. And it's a great read that helps understand some practical ways that you can become more agile in the way you exercise your emotions. And so these are just a few strategies that you can consider as you're striving to be more emotionally confident so that you can become on a regular basis more emotionally available. Now, as promised, I want to share a few tips on the whole idea of emotions because I feel like this is something our culture doesn't help us with here. First thing I want to share with you is this. There is such thing as primary and secondary emotions. You might even have heard them referred to as, this is kind of how I refer to it with my clients, emotions versus feelings. And so I think of emotions, using that terminology, emotions as that initial reaction when something happens that you had no idea was going to happen. And that is human, and that is normal, and that is natural. And it's not something you need to change. When someone hits you in your car, you're going to have an emotional reaction to that. How you choose to process that over time is what I consider then the feelings afterwards, the secondary emotions. And I believe that a lot of people are locked up with emotional, they're in some kind of an emotional prison with anxiety and depression and fear because they haven't allowed time and intention and targeted behaviors to transition emotions into feelings. And so making that distinction is very important. Another tip I want to share with you is feelings are not always true, but they're always valid. So if I think someone does something to hurt me on purpose, I'm going to have an emotional reaction to that. When I sit down and have a conversation with them and discover that that wasn't intentional at all, it was inadvertent, or maybe they were just being careless, my feelings now begin to change into something that brings healing for me, because now I recognize that in my initial emotional reaction, though valid, wasn't true because I didn't have all the information. Conversations are conduits to healing. And when I have a conversation with somebody that I think has hurt me, hopefully the end result of that is that you're going to be able to have different feelings about what took place there, and bring about some healing in your life. So let me give you another tip. Emotions do not change until loss is processed. This is almost what I was talking about a second ago. After that emotional reaction, you have to learn to place value on the loss in order to ascribe different feelings. And so that's what grief is. Grief is processing loss. It's placing value on something that is no longer in my life. And I mean, I've lost jobs and relationships, and then after those things, I look back and I think, wow, there was a blessing there, or there was a better opportunity there. And I'm sure you could probably do the same thing. So emotions do not change until the loss is processed. And then finally, I want to tell you this. It's very important that we label the emotion so that we can control it. If you don't control the emotion will control you. And so it's very important that you actually use emotional vocabulary. Don't use the phrase, I feel like, because when you say I feel like, you're sharing a thought. It's a cognition, because no one says I feel like hurt. I feel like sad. They say I feel sad. And don't say I am sad, because you are more complicated than your feelings. Just share how you feel. Put an emotional word to it. Label the emotion so that you can control it, so that it doesn't control you. And when we learn to understand the difference between those initial emotional reactions and then the feelings that we can process through grief and an understanding and placing value on the loss, all of a sudden we begin to take more control of our emotions. We increase our emotional confidence, and then we can take that confidence into other relationships, and hopefully it'll be a help to us and the people around us. All right, I'm going to share one last thing with you. Why does all this matter? I mean, ultimately, why would we even talk about this? Because if people choose to be emotionally unavailable, isn't that their business? Isn't that something that someone can just choose to do on their own? I mean, they're not really hurting anybody, are they? I can't tell you how many people that I've talked to about their emotional regulation that said they never saw their parents have conflict, or it wasn't productive. No one ever taught them how to manage their emotions. And I think about how important it is, not just in the workplace, but in our homes, that we are able to process loss and talk about how we feel about things. And the best gift that you can give to your kids, if you have children, the best gift that you can give to them is the ability to understand, manage, label, control, process their emotions. I'm here to tell you it is an incredible gift when you're able to share that with your kids. Way too many people have told me they never got that from their parents. And I'm asking for you to get better here. If this is an area of concern for you, if it's an area of growth that you want, that you do it for the children in your life that would absolutely take those lessons from you. They would learn those principles. You could help imprint these truths into their lives such that 20 years from now, 30 years from now, that's just how they do relationships. I want to be a resource for you. If you have comments or questions, please leave them below. Share this with somebody that you think maybe could use it. You're welcome to leave feedback as well as far as different topics that you think it would be good if I could take a look at those topics and cover those things. I'll certainly consider that, and I just want to be a resource to help you. So I wish you have a great week, and I'll see you next week.